Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen. It's been raining outside for a couple of days straight at the moment, and I'm kind of stranded here in the Aussie Shed, so I'm looking for something to do. I'll just show you why I'm stranded here. We'll just keep that shut. So I've been thinking, what can I do to just kill a bit of time while I'm in here? What can I make? So I've come up with a little bit of a small project. So what I'm going to make, folks, is an oil filter cutter. I've just got a clean oil filter here to show you. You probably know what an oil filter cutter is. Basically, it just cuts around the base of your oil filter like a can opener, so that when you do an oil change, you can actually open the filter up and inspect the element inside. Because you know, if you're really serious about monitoring your engine, your oil can look completely clean and everything can be kind of pretty good, but the whole point of the filter is it picks up all the particles out of the oil, and there can be debris in the filter that may not be obvious in your oil. So with my Nissan 370 GT that's over here, being that I've turboed it and done all sorts of stuff to it, I'd really like to be able to cut my oil filters open every time I change one, just to give me a little bit of an extra advantage as far as monitoring the condition of the engine. So I just thought I'll go through all the crap that I've got here in the shed and I'll see what I've got that I can make this out of. Because being that I am a complete tight ass, I thought, well, I don't want to pay for something like this. I want to be able to make it up for nothing. So I'm pretty sure I've assembled everything that I need to make an oil filter cutter. Fortunately, one of the main components here is I have a couple of spare cutting wheels. These just go into a standard sort of a pipe cutter, you know, for cutting copper pipe and stuff like that on plumbing stuff. So I had a pack with 2 spare ones in that. I'll just use one of those. And these are worth all of probably like $5 for a 2-pack, you know, on eBay and whatever. There's all sorts of different ones, different sizes. I'm just using what I've got, which is these guys. So we'll go through the other stuff too. I've got a couple of bearings here. These were just, I don't know, I pulled them out of something. Not sure where they've come from, but they're used. And they're in reasonable condition, which is why I've hung on to them. Obviously, there's a difference between something that's going to be used at high speed in a machine compared to something like this that you're just trying to reduce friction on. These will be absolutely fine for this. You probably wouldn't want to run them in something that's running at 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. But just for a simple thing like this, they're absolutely fine. I tend to often, well, I actually have quite a collection of bearings that I've pulled out of stuff that aren't completely shit, that are just, you know, you wouldn't want to put them back into something that was spinning fast. But for a job like this, they're absolutely fine. So yeah, just some aluminium offcuts. I've got a bit of a collection of a threaded rod here. And I've already started to lay it out. I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera because I've only drawn it on there pretty light. That's sort of the main frame. This is a piece across the end. You see that? Yeah, maybe. And they'll just sort of bolt together and all that sort of stuff. So what I'm about to do, folks, is I'm about to go and cut this out on the bandsaw. And once I do that, I'll bring it back here and we'll see how it progresses from there. Alrighty, so that's what we need. That's our offcut. I'll just get rid of that. Now I just need to take out this piece through the center here, folks. I'll just use a drill and I'll just drill through there to sort of get rid of this. Right, so this is how it's sort of going to go, folks. This piece is going to bolt onto there, and the bearings are going to go on top of that, like sort of so. And we'll just see. So what I might do is just shape this up properly, just on the belt sander, just clean it up a bit, and I might just clean up this slot a bit, just in the drill press. Right, we'll go and clean this one up anyway. Right folks, let's take this over to the drill press and just clean all these edges up a bit, maybe clean this slot up a bit, and we'll get that done and we'll move on to the next bit. It's a lot tidier now, everything's nice and straight again. Mind you, you could do all this just with a file by hand. I'm using me modified drill press just because I have it there, but there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to replicate all this with a file. It just would take a bit longer to do, that's all. Okay, I've also done a couple of other things. I've got a couple of holes drilled and tapped here in the end, and I've done a little bit of work to this sort of dog bone piece on the end that holds the rollers, which locates the oil filter. So you can see I've tapped a couple of holes on either end there, M8, and they match the roller bolts here. And I've also created a bit of a recess in the back here, just to get my heights set up a little bit better where it sits on here. I've just been working trying to position the height of the oil filter and the rollers so that it's sort of an optimal place where it's going to cut the filter. So yeah, that's why I've done that. Obviously there's a lot of different ways you could sort of do this other than just, you know, doing it on the drill press like I have done with an end mill in there. But, you know, for me that was the easiest thing to do. What I'm getting at, folks, is I'm just trying to do this in such a way that you could do it with some pretty basic hand tools, which is really all I'm using here other than my drill press, which is probably more of a tool that, you know, your average person doesn't have a mill or a drill press like that in their workshop. So anyway, folks, I'll just slip some bolts in this, and I'll sort of give you a bit of an idea of how it sort of goes together. This piece just bolts on the end there, and I'm trying to do all this too with bolts and stuff, folks, just so that you can see it doesn't need to be done with a welder, because once again, not everyone has access to a welder to weld aluminium. So a project like this, I think it's sort of important when you're trying to show people, you know, how to make stuff, like I'm obviously trying to demonstrate here, that I try to use tools and stuff that most people have access to, more so than fancy whiz-bang equipment that obviously you can make all sorts of stuff with reasonably easy. So the whole point of the Aussie Shed, folks, to show you that you don't need an absolute fortune in tools to be able to make stuff and do things. You just need to have a go, have a bit of a crack, as I like to say, and just think about stuff, you know. Like even my drill press that I have been using to do this with is something that I rigged up myself. It's not, you know, it's not a super expensive bit of gear that you might see in a really fancy workshop. It's literally just a thing built by a dodgy bloke in his workshop. Alrighty. So you can see how that's shaping up there now, folks. That's the end piece. That's how it looks underneath. That's how it's on the end, where you can see where it's cut down over the top. As I say, that cutting that down there is just so that I get a good position with the bearings there on the oil filter. I want to obviously be up over that lip on the bottom edge there, but I want to be nice and low because I want to keep my cut as low as I can. And the cutter, ideally you want the cutter to be located in the center of the bearing so that when it pushes, it's not, you're not above and you'll push the filter out like this, or if you were below it, you'd be sort of pushing the filter under. So you've got to be able to line everything up in the right position, and that's just what I determined to be my spot on there. Having those two bearings there just allows this to spin really easily. And where I've got them, I can also fit a smaller filter in. You can see I've got this sort of shape cut in there. That's the reason why I cut that into that shape and didn't just leave it square across. It's to give clearance for the filter, and I've gone in deeper so that I have clearance for smaller filters. Alright. And while I've been making stuff, folks, I've made these two pieces here as well. Now these were just offcuts of some aluminium stuff that I had, some 50x50 or something. And you can see marks from where they've been hit with an end mill, but what I did with these, I used a hacksaw and cut out the section on both of these and then just cleaned it up with an end mill, because my drill press is pretty slow at removing a lot of material. If you're only removing a small amount of material, yeah, it's absolutely fine, but it's very slow when you've got to cut a lot of stuff away. So I've got to always be thinking about how I can remove the bulk of material before putting it in the drill press to kind of square everything up, you know. So I'll show you where these go. This first piece here, it's what ties this end back together. I cut that slot through because it was easy to do, more so than make it a blind slot. I just figured that when I got to this point, I would do this piece, I would fill that slot back in and sort of use that to clamp it back together to give it that strength back that I've taken away by cutting through the end of it. And that's the slider there, folks. So you can see it's starting to sort of come together. So this will be bolted through from underneath. So what I'll do probably now is I'll drill and tap some holes through the bottom here and put a couple of, I don't know, M6 or something bolts up through there. So this slider here, this is what will hold the cutter that'll be cutting into the filter. So this is about 6mm. So I've got a cutter slot in here, 6mm wide, and just big enough to give me clearance for this, and then I'll just drill a hole straight through that way and tap it and use a bolt to sort of secure this. So you can see I've got a 6mm end mill here that I'm going to use to cut this section here out with. And it should be starting to look pretty good. Obviously then I've got threaded rod sitting, you know, over here. I've then got to work out which bit of threaded rod I'm going to use, and then I'll just drill and tap down through this way for me threaded rod and just create a bit of a recess in the end of this, maybe a grub screw to hold the threaded rod in there, just so that it gives me sort of push-pull capability without the threaded rod coming out of here. And it's starting to, as you can see, it's starting to look like a tool now instead of just bits of scrap aluminium. So I'll carry on, folks, and maybe fix this in position and all this sort of stuff. I'll fancy all this up a bit too when I'm finished, and cut some angles on the edges and make it look a bit, you know, more like a proper tool when it's done. But for now, I'll carry on with these. A little bit more progress now, folks. So our our end stop here is finished. Oh well, it's not finished, but it's ready to bolt on. So I'll just bolt that on for you. So that's just basically been cleaned up a little bit, and I've just drilled and tapped through the bottom here just to sort of secure this in position. Like I say, I should be able to get all this done without needing to weld anything, just as a sort of a bolt together unit, hopefully. So that's good. That's now fixed in position, and it ties that back together as I mentioned. I've also done a bit of work on our cutter carrier here, the sort of slider. So I've cut the recess there, and I did that just with a 6mm drill. Just sort of went down a heap of times to the depth, and then just cleaned it out with a 6mm end mill. And I've drilled and tapped down through here to hold the cutter. And there's our cutter. It's ready to go in now. So that'll just go in there like so. Bolt down through there. That's our cutter held in position. It's reasonably firm in there. It's got clearance to move, but it sort of can't wobble too much. Righto, and then that goes on our piece here to sort of slide up and down towards the oil filter. And then to retain this, I've just got a washer, and I've tapped another hole in the bottom, 5mm I think it is, just with a 5mm Phillips head bloody screw bolt thingy in the bottom. Oh. And that just works really well. When I made this slider piece up here, I left this tang in the middle slightly long. It's probably, I don't know, 1/4 millimeter I guess, protruding out above this edge here, so that when this washer went down on top, it still gives it clearance to be able to slide. So you can see it's starting to look like a tool now, folks. Another quick demo with the oil filter. So you can see how it goes. The cutter goes up against it, and then you just rotate the filter against the blade as you slowly tighten the blade, and Bob's your uncle. So all we need to do now is to be able to control the cutter. So it's going to be a matter of drilling and tapping through here into here. Use a bit of threaded rod to fix that up, and we should be good as gold. I've started on a bit of threaded rod over on the mini lathe, so we'll go over and have a look at that. So I've just cut off a bit of 10mm threaded rod, folks. It's just a bit of the stuff that I had on the bench there. It's nothing special. It's actually galvanized, bloody mild steel 10mm threaded rod. I'm using it specifically because I've got it there, and so yeah, it's, you know, it's sort of long enough to do the job, and I've just turned the end of it just to get rid of the thread. So this piece will just sort of slide into a hole I'm going to drill in the end of that cutter. And then I'll just put a bit of a groove in this and maybe a grub screw down to lock it on. But I'll continue on with this, and I'll get those pieces all drilled and set up, and then we'll have another look at it. A bit more progress, folks. You can see we now have a thread tapped in the end of this, and I also have a hole in the end of the slider, and also another threaded tapped hole in the end of here. Now this is the piece of threaded rod that I'm going to be using to drive the slider with, and you can see I've had this on the lathe, which you saw before, and that's the shape that I've sort of turned onto the end of it, and that is to allow a grub screw to go down beside it, and that's where it sort of locks in. So it locks into that recess, which stops it pulling out of the slider here when it goes in. So I'll just screw this together, and this will fill you in on exactly what I'm talking about. So we thread that up through there. I turned this down to 6mm on here, just so that it worked with a 6mm drill and a 6mm end mill to get me a nice flat hole in there, and it works with a 6mm washer. So you can see this goes into here, like so. And then once that's in there, then the grub screw here goes down in there, and this lines up with the recess that you just saw in the end. I'll just screw this in. So what that does is it retains that threaded rod. So when we push, the force goes against the washer, which then transfers the force onto the cut, the rebate that's in the end of the rod there. So you've got quite a decent surface area to push against. And also the hole in here where that little piece protrudes in there is also a flat bottom hole. And those two should be touching at the same time. So the end of the rod touches the end of the hole, along with the this washer and everything all sort of bottoming out at the same time, which gives you a push. So you can see obviously now how that's going to work. I'll just grab our oil filter back out. Let's see. So once again, another demo. Now that we've got our oil filter in there, we'll then just screw that up. As we push tension on that, it starts to force into the oil filter. We turn the oil filter, and that gets us a nice clean cut. And of course the whole point of this is doing a cut that doesn't put any debris into the oil filter. So you know, anything else that you're going to cut this thing with, like you know, a grinder or you know, anything like that. Obviously you can use tin snips and things, but it's all pretty, you know, pretty sort of scary way to attack something like this. Whereas this this should be just a really super neat alternative. These things have been around for a long time anyway, folks. You can find them anywhere online. This is just my attempt at, you know, knocking one up out of crap that I've already got, so I don't have to buy one, and kills a bit of time, and I get to make a YouTube video about it. But yes, as you can see, that pulls back, so it's starting to be a functional unit. This would actually work now. I could just turn this at the end and turn that, but there is a little bit more to it. We want to add a little bit of finesse to the tool to make it just a little bit better. So obviously I need to make up a knob for the end of this and work out a way of attaching the knob. So I've got a bit of aluminium here, some 50mm I think it is. I made some knobs up from a press in a couple of previous videos using this stuff. I'll probably do a similar thing, and just sort of put a bit of a decent grippy knob on the end of here that I can use. So that'll sort the knob out, and I'm just going to make a way to mount it into a vise so that it's you know, it's easy to sort of get hold of, so you're not trying to manhandle it when you're cutting filters, having the thing flailing around. I want this to be mounted in a vise, and then be able to use a tool, an oil filter wrench or something on the top to sort of work the cutting action, just so that it's nice and safe, because these things are pretty sharp. It's like cutting a food can open, you know. So we want to do it all nice and safe. So that's where it's at this stage, folks. I'll carry on. I'll get this knob made, and I'll get a bit of a bracket made for holding it down, and I might even start on a bit of fancy work on this, just to put a few angles on and clean it up and make it look a bit like a SMIC tool. But as you can see, folks, it's gone from a pile of aluminium scrap and just some, you know, some old bearings and some bits and pieces to what's almost a usable tool. I'll be back. Alright folks, we are nearly there. This is our knob now complete. That's how it turned out. A couple of grooves on the back there. Bit of a knurling. That knurling was already on the offcut. I just made use of it. And what I've done here is I've just sort of turned it down, drilled and tapped it for a 10mm thread, the same as this. I've got about probably 5mm in the bottom of the hole. Went in all the way that I could with this, put a couple of nuts on it, did it up really tight. Then drilled down through here and just put an M6 grub screw in. drilled right through the knob until I impacted onto the threaded rod there. Then backed it all out, tapped the thread in this, and then carried that that drill hole through into the rod, probably about 3 mil. So it actually does up tight on the end of the thread, and then the grub screw goes down into that hole that I drilled and locks it in. It's absolutely perfect. It's not like this is something that's you know, having a hell of a lot of force on it. You're not going to be putting bloody multi grips or anything on this handle to turn it. You'll be able to turn it very easily to do the job just with your hand. So I've also done a couple of other things other than the knob. So these are our two sort of main blocks. That's our slider, and that's our piece that has the thread that carries the rod through. As you can see with these, I've cut a 45 off the edges of those just to tidy them up a bit so they don't just look so much like a lump of aluminium. So I might just put the whole thing together now, and we'll take a bit of a look at it. So she all assembles pretty easily now, folks. Our slider just goes on. Piece just goes on the back. Which way do we go? Here we go. Phillips heads go in here. I don't really like using Phillips heads, but you know, I'd rather use sort of an Allen key driver. But I don't know if I mentioned, but I've got a whole heap of these in a drawer left over from a job. I'm like, oh well, I might as well use them. As you do, just to keep the cost of everything down. But it is starting to look like a proper tool now, folks. That is the positive side of it. Alright. Throw the handle on. There we go. And there it is, folks. So it's definitely starting to look like a real tool. Well, it actually is a real tool now. It would actually function absolutely perfectly. Oh, I can feel a little bit of a burr there. But yeah, so when it's all closed up, that's what she looks like. I'll give it a bit of a tidy up when it's finished. Maybe just give it a bit of a sort of a light rub over with some fine paper just to get all the sort of scratches off it from while I've been handling it, while I've been making it. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. So this is the first time I'm winding this back to see if these bevels meet. Oh yeah, they're pretty good. Not too bad. Yeah, you got to call that a pass. Okay, I got one job left to do, folks, and then it's done and dusted. And that is, I want to make a mount for it so I can put it into a vise. I'll just move this over here so we can see the vise. What I want to do is I want to be able to mount it like this down in the vise. So I'll just put a block, another block of aluminium here across the bottom, so that I can just do that up in the vise. It gives me good access to the handle on this end then, you know, to tension and loosen it. Plus it's held down in the vise. I have seen people use this style of filter cutter on the top of the filter and just turn it, but it just leaves you in a position where you've got this sharp thing that you're trying to hold onto and handle this. Much better to just clamp this thing in the vise. Use a tool on your oil filter, an oil filter wrench or whatever, and it's just a very safe way of doing it. Yes, it's probably going to be a little bit messier. The filter should be drained, but there's probably still going to be some oil that comes out when you actually separate the outer casing. But bad luck, that's just the way it is. I'd rather that than bloody gash myself on a cut oil filter. So bear with me, folks. I'll make up this piece. I'll come back. I might even give it a bit of a clean up and a bit of love before you come back for the final time, and we'll look at the finished product. Okay, I'll be back. Alright folks, I'm back and she's all done. That's the little block that I just made up there to hold it in the vise. See, just a couple of holes down through there, some 6mm countersunk stainless steel screws, and I've given it all a bit of a clean up. I've just been over it with a bit of sandpaper just to sort of even the finish up on everything, just so that it all looks pretty smick. And so that's it. It's finished. And the only thing left to do now, folks, is send it out on its maiden voyage. So let's drop it in the vise and cut a filter open. That should give us a pretty good bird's eye view, folks. I've got an oil filter here. I've just done an oil change on my my turbo diesel high ace. It's a 3-litre turbo diesel. It's been having a few problems with very strange oil pressure readings lately, and I've got a pretty fair idea what it is. And I think cutting open this filter should throw some light on the subject. So let's cut it open and see. Snug her up. I've got like a filter wrench top here for it. I'm just going to use a ratchet on the top there and just spin him around. So we'll just snug the cutter up a little bit and just start going around. And that's it, folks. I think we are possibly, that's her. We're all the way around. Alright, let's get it into this pan and have a bit of a look at it. So she should just come straight apart, folks. And I might finally be able to work out what the hell's going on with the oil pressure in this thing. Yep, that'll do it. This just keeps happening to me. One positive thing about this though, folks, is they are very, very tasty. And there you have it, folks. The DIY oil filter cutter video is now complete. So as always, folks, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Bloody pleasure to have you here. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell and all that great YouTube stuff. And I'll bloody see yous on the next one. Cheers.